Bedtime stories for adults. If, like me, some of your fondest memories are of being tucked in and hearing a favorite story as you drifted off to sleep, you'll love this channel. Here, you'll find gentle bedtime readings of my own books, narrated by my assistant May, in a soft, soothing voice designed to help you relax. No jarring sound effects, no sudden noises, just calm, feel good stories to ease you into sleep. If you enjoy these stories and would like to support the channel, you can also find all of my books available on Amazon. Chapter 1. I met David Strydonk in my early 30s, and from then on, he became my greatest friend. David was the kind of friend you could lean on in any situation, the one you could tell anything to and know you'd get honesty back without judgment or fear it would ever leave the room. He was the kind of friend you end up measuring everyone else against, and nobody ever came close. To me, he wasn't just a friend, he was like a brother. We stayed that way right up until the day he mysteriously passed, 9 years later. But when I first met him, we were just two broke men standing in a line for day labor jobs on a cold Ottawa morning. After leaving Compaq, I had the severance in my pocket and little else. With Tracy and our three kids depending on me, I managed to scrape together enough to rent a modest townhouse in a part of the city no real estate agent would brag about. It was the kind of neighborhood where the paint peeled from the balconies and people looked at you twice before saying hello. Still, it was ours, and that meant survival. The front room became my chance at something better. With the last of the severance, I bought tattoo equipment and opened a shop out of the townhouse. It wasn't fancy. The buzz of the machines echoed off thin walls, the smell of ink clung to the curtains, and my advertising amounted to word of mouth and a small hand-painted sign. Clients trickled in slowly. Some days, nobody came at all. To keep food on the table, I woke before dawn and stood in line for day labor jobs, hoping my name would be called. That's where I saw him. A giant of a man, 6'2", broad as a barn door, and easily 300 pounds. He carried his size with a strange grace, like he wasn't weighed down by it at all. His laugh was big, his voice rolled out like a bass drum, and he made the waiting easier. We talked about fishing, the way men do when work doesn't come and you need to fill the silence. He mentioned Clayton Lake, a little man-made reservoir stocked with bass. When our job got canceled that morning and no other work came up, I sighed and said, "Screw it, I'm going fishing." David grinned at me. "Clayton Lake? I wish. No car." "I've got one," he said, shrugging like it was nothing. "You got boat rental money?" "I'll find some," I shot back, half daring myself. That was it. A simple exchange, but it spun the wheel of fate. We drove to my place to grab my gear. Tracy was less than pleased when I told her I wasn't bringing home a paycheck that day. But when she looked out and saw David waiting by the car, she softened. She knew I hadn't had a real friend since my breakdown after Compaq, and maybe she sensed this was important. We didn't have money for a boat, so we dragged an old TV out of the house, pawned it, and drove out of the city with just enough cash to rent a rickety bass boat. That afternoon on the lake, the sun glinting off the water, David opened up. He told me he and two friends had moved from Oil Springs, Ontario, a small industrial town, hoping to find their fortunes. Back then, David fancied himself a bricklayer, convinced he could build a career out of it. I remember telling him gently, "It's good money when you're young, but years of wet cement and heavy bricks? It'll eat your back alive. You'll regret it when you're older." He shrugged and laughed it off, but I could see he was listening. Years later, when he went back to school and came out with an engineering degree and even a big rig license, I like to think maybe my words had planted a seed. In those early days, when there wasn't much work, David started hanging around my tattoo shop. He had a way of filling a room. Women came in shy, nervous about the needles, but David's booming laugh and easy charm relaxed them. He loved watching the process, especially when someone wanted tattoos in places they'd usually keep covered. With his larger-than-life personality, he was as much a part of the show as I was. Truth be told, I didn't mind. He was good for business, and it almost felt like he belonged there, like he knew his job was to help me get started on this new path. Dave was, at his core, a big kid. Always had been. On weekends, he'd vanish from the front room and end up in the backyard with my kids. Scott at 11, Robin at 6, and little Kayla, KK, just 5. Their shrieks of laughter carried through the walls as they played with him. I'd hear them and feel a pang of jealousy that I couldn't be out there too, free from the weight of bills and responsibilities. But watching them through the window, all tangled up in games and giggles, I knew he was becoming part of my family in a way that was rare and precious. That first year flew by. Business picked up. I was mentioned in a few articles, even won an award or two. My name was starting to circulate in tattoo circles, and for the first time in years, I felt momentum. David kept at his bricklaying, but whenever we could, we'd sneak away to fish, sometimes bringing the kids along and giving Tracy a break. Then came the letter. The health department had taken notice of my little shop in the townhouse, and they weren't impressed. Regulations, inspections, threats of fines, it all came down like a hammer. It nearly crushed me, undoing everything I'd built. I remember sitting there with the notice in my hands, the ink smudged from my sweating fingers, wondering if I'd have to give it all up. David just looked at me, calm as ever, and said, "Don't worry, brother, we'll figure it out." And somehow, with him around, I believed we would. Chapter 2. 2 days after the letter from the health department landed like a brick on my chest, Dave saved my bacon. I saw him through the front window, not easing into the driveway like a civilized human, but rolling the sedan onto the grass and backing straight toward the porch until the bumper kissed the steps. I folded my arms and gave him the look. He waved like a parade marshal. "Hey, lazy ass, come help me with this." I stepped outside, already half grinning, half groaning. He popped the trunk, and there it was. An old army green behemoth that looked like it fell off a MASH truck. An autoclave, all dents and rivets, with a pressure gauge like a watchful eye. "It's not new," he said, beaming, "but it works. How much does it weigh?" 200, if it's in a good mood. We got our fingers underneath and did that slow count lift that men do when neither wants to admit how heavy something is. We crab walked it through the doorway, dinged the frame, swore, laughed, set it down, adjusted grips, swore again, and finally muscled it onto a short metal stand I'd scavenged from a thrift shop. Dave patted the top twice like he was calming a horse. We wired it in and gave it a trial run. I washed a handful of metal tubes, back when we still used them, and slid the tray inside. The autoclave growled awake, valves rattling, the gauge needle nudging into the safe zone. 10 minutes later, the smell rolled out. Old machine funk blended with hot metal, and whatever ghosts were baked into its guts. It had the sour, sterile tang of a hospital corridor mixed with a wet rag basement. It hit the back of the throat and sat there, stubborn. "Good Lord," I gagged, hand over my mouth. "What died in there?" "Everything that shouldn't be in your tattoo shop," Dave said, fanning the air and grinning. "You're welcome." We opened every window and set a fan on the floor to chase the smell toward the street. For 3 days, you could taste autoclave in the drywall. I didn't care. I had the one thing the clipboard man could not sneer away. Dave disappeared that afternoon and came back with more loot. A box of sterilization pouches, a used ultrasonic cleaner in need of a cord, 3 rolls of biohazard bags, and a red Sharps container that had seen better decals. He set it all on the counter like he was outfitting a clinic. "You're going to need a log," he said, rummaging for a pen. "Date, cycle, temp, pressure. Inspector wants to see you take it seriously." "You moonlight as a bureaucrat now?" "I moonlight as your bouncer, accountant, and assistant manager," he said, and wrote sterilization record across the top of a notebook I'd been using for sketches. He drew columns with the side of a receipt. "There. Do it right, or you'll be back on the day labor line." I should have bristled at that. Instead, I felt the ground firm beneath my feet. The inspector returned on a Thursday. Summer suit, winter attitude. He sniffed at the doorway, eyes narrowed as the autoclave hissed to itself in the corner. "That new?" he asked. "New to me," I said. He circled the thing like it might bite, ran a finger along the gasket, checked the gauge, read my crooked logbook, and chewed on the end of his pen for drama. He asked about spore tests. I told him I'd ordered a kit that morning. True enough, David shoved the catalog under my nose at breakfast. The man made a note, then clicked his pen shut. "Conditional compliance," he said. 90 days. Keep records, do your tests, maintain your setup. We'll be back." I signed whatever he handed me. He left. I didn't breathe until the sedan turned at the end of the block. Dave slapped my shoulder. "See? All it takes is a war relic and clean paperwork. I laughed a little too loudly and leaned my head against the cool metal of the autoclave. The shop was going to live. Dave turned my front room into a place people trusted. He hung shelves and squared my wobbly table. He found a surplus desk for $50 that looked like it had survived a courthouse fire and still wanted to work. We ran a dryer vent hose out a side window to keep the hot, chemical breath of the autoclave from settling over the couch. He installed a hook for each machine cord so nobody tripped. Little things. The kind you don't notice until they're missing. He also took over the door like he'd been born to it. Nervous walk-ins would step in clutching printouts and half ideas. Dave would greet them with a mug of coffee and a story that led them gently from panic to plan. He didn't sell tattoos. He sold ease. One afternoon, a woman in her 40s came in alone, sleeves rolled to her elbows, a sketch of a small bird folded in her hand. She sat across from me, set the paper down, and fumbled with the corner until it frayed. "Can we do it here?" she asked softly, touching the inside of her forearm. There was a pale line there, the kind of scar that settles after a surgery leaves. I nodded and drew, and she watched with that particular mix of fear and relief that people bring to the chair. When the machine hummed, she closed her eyes. Dave stood in the doorway and pretended to sort needles so she'd have a big, friendly shape at her back. When we were done, she looked at the bird, then at me, then at Dave, and she cried. Quietly, gratefully, the way a wall falls without a sound. She hugged me, then, hesitating, hugged him too. Dave looked like a grizzly that had been handed a teacup and told not to break it. He did fine. Word like that travels faster than flyers ever do. But he made flyers anyway. We stood at the public library feeding nickels into a machine that coughed out grainy copies. Clean as a clinic. Art with a story. He came up with the line. We papered coffee shops, pawn counters, and the notice board at a grocery store where every third tier off tab was for a couch that smelled like someone else's life. A biker named Reggie came in the next week, demanding a cover-up for his ex's name. He wanted a skull. No, a snake. No, an 8-ball with flames. Dave steered him, easy hand on the back of a running horse, toward a black rose with a shadow so deep it swallowed regret. Reggie left smiling. He sent 3 friends. A student nearly fainted during a tiny ankle tattoo. Dave handed over the sugar candies he kept in his pocket for low blood emergencies and bribes, and told a story about the time he passed out watching his own blood pressure get taken. The kid laughed and stayed upright. Dave went out of his way to mend what he dented. The lawn, for instance. The tire ruts out front were a personal affront to Tracy's sense of dignity. The look she gave them could have browned grass. Dave showed up Saturday with 2 bags of soil, a flat of sod, and one of those tampers with a square metal foot. He fixed the lawn while the kids watched through the window like it was a TV show for grown men. When he was done, he knocked on the door and apologized to Tracy. She made him lemonade and sent him back out to lay a little stepping stone so future Daves could reach the porch without baptizing the grass. Summer ran its course. Ottawa does that thing where the light goes copper in August and every evening smells faintly of barbecues you weren't invited to. We lived with the windows open, the fan pulling autoclave breath out and birdsong in. I drew late into the night, a cone of lamplight on skin and stencil. Dave occupied the chair by the window like a lighthouse, quiet, steady, there. When he wasn't greeting, he was fixing. A loose hinge, a crooked frame, a squeak in the chair that got on my nerves, and apparently on his nerves more. The neighbors warmed up one by one. The older woman next door liked Dave because he lifted her bags without asking and salted her steps before she thought to. The guy across the street liked him because Dave knew his team's stats better than he did and still let him talk. The kids liked him because he made everything a game. Mine liked him because when he was around, their father smiled more. We had a small celebration when the first conditional compliance letter came back, stamped satisfactory after a spore test, cheap cake, better coffee, Tracy's cautious relief. Dave stuck the letter on the wall with blue painter's tape like a diploma. Now you've got paper that says you're as clean as you always were, he said. Feels different seeing it, I admitted. He nodded. People need symbols. Stick a gold star on a door and half the city will walk through it. I looked at the battered autoclave. the logbook with its neat columns, the little improvements that added up to something sturdy. A gold star. Who knew? We kept moving. Dave found 2 used rolling stools at a garage sale and haggled them down with a joke about one wheel being possessed. He built a shallow drawer just for needles, so I wouldn't have to rummage in the same bin for gloves and ink caps. He brought in a radio that only got 3 stations, but could fill the room with a soft blanket of sound. It made the buzzing less lonely. On a wet afternoon, a young man with nervous shoulders came in, sketch of a compass in his pocket. He talked about getting lost and wanting something that pointed him somewhere. I drew a clean, simple compass and set it just left of his heart. The needle swung toward northwest. Why that way? Dave asked afterward. The kid said it was the direction of home. Dave went quiet in that thoughtful way he had sometimes, like he'd slipped into a pocket of distance. Then he snapped back and offered the kid a coffee on the house. The compass looked good. The kid stood taller. Life inched forward. We were still broke more days than not. Bills stack like bricks even when you're careful, but the stack felt less precarious. The shop held together. Tracy slept easier. The kid stopped asking if we were moving again. I didn't know where Dave had found the autoclave. He didn't say, and I didn't ask. Not then. It was enough that he'd dragged it to my door and made me legal. Years later, I'd learn it cost him 2 weeks of back-breaking work for a retired military doctor who hoarded medical gear like trophies. 2 weeks of laying block in the heat, building a garden wall straight enough to make a sergeant weep. And all he said at the time was, "Grab an end." That was Dave. He solved the problem, swallowed the cost, and made a joke so you'd swallow yours. 90 days after conditional, the inspector returned, less winter in his eyes this time. He ran his checks without commentary and left me with a real, no asterisk approval. I signed and taped it under the first letter, star and star. Dave stood back with his arms folded. "Looks like a real shop," he said. "It is a real shop." "Yeah," he said and grinned. "Now it looks like one." We closed early and sat on the porch steps with paper cups of coffee. The lawn lines lay straight as an army haircut where he'd tamped the sod. The kids chalked hopscotch on the sidewalk and cheated openly. Traffic hummed. A breeze nosed through the open window and tugged at the blue tape on the certificate until it flapped like a tiny flag. "You know," Dave said, not looking at me, "some things you build so they last. Some things you build so someone else can stand on them." I asked what he meant. He took a sip, shrugged, and smiled. Just thinking out loud. It didn't feel like a prophecy then. It felt like 2 men on a porch, the worst of a small storm behind them, evening coming on soft. If there were larger currents already tugging at the edges of our days, we didn't see them. Not yet. For the moment, the shop breathed evenly. The autoclave ticked to itself in the corner, and my best friend was exactly where he belonged. Chapter 3. Dave's old crew was breaking apart. Jen was getting married, Roger had a job offer out west, and the beach house they'd rented at Mooney's Bay was coming to the end of its lease. Dave had maybe a month left before it all dissolved, and he was already grumbling about maybe packing it in and heading back to Oil Springs. Half joking, I said, "You can have the back room in the basement for free." His eyes lit up instantly. "Really? Don't thank me till you see it," I warned. The stairs to our basement were narrow, creaky, and steep, the kind you take sideways if you're carrying anything larger than a laundry basket. Dave followed me down, ducking his head as the ceiling dropped. At 6'2" and 300 pounds, he looked like a bear trying to fit into a rabbit hole. "I feel like Winnie the Pooh," he muttered. "Hope I don't get stuck halfway." "You might," I said, grinning, "but I'll charge admission for the kids to push you free." At the bottom, he stood in the dim light, surveying his new kingdom. The ceiling sagged unevenly, barely scraping 6 feet at its highest point. The front room was cluttered with toys, plastic bins stacked high, dolls and action figures, and the inflatable bouncy castle half collapsed in the corner. Its turrets leaned drunkenly against the wall, but the girls still loved it. The washer and dryer rattled on the far wall, laundry lines zigzagging across the ceiling. "This is the playroom," I explained. "And storage. And laundry. And chaos." He raised his eyebrows. "Multi-purpose. Nice." I led him into the back room. Here the walls were raw brick, the floor rough cement. An old furnace hunched in the corner, rusted and useless, and right in the center of the room stood a toilet. No walls, no privacy, just a lonely porcelain sentinel under a dangling bulb. Dave stared at it for a long moment. You serious? That's the gem, I said, deadpan. He stepped forward, ran a hand over the cracked seat, and grinned. Perfect. Don't change a thing. You're insane. No, he said, plopping down on the lid like it was a recliner. I've got a throne. He spread his arms, grinning at the brick walls. Behold, Dave's cave. And just like that, the name stuck. I'll never know how he did it, but within a week he managed to fit half a beach house worth of furniture into that 11 by 11 by 6-foot box, a bed frame squeezed against the far wall, curtains made of old rock flags giving him the illusion of privacy. He rigged a hot plate and a toaster into a kitchen nook. A bookshelf appeared, stacked with paperbacks and mugs, balanced against the uneven wall. The toilet throne became his favorite chair. He'd drape a cushion over it, lean back, and hold court with whoever came down to visit. He kept a cooler at his side for drinks and snacks. The kids were fascinated. Uncle Dave lives in the dungeon, Robin whispered one night, wide-eyed. It's not a dungeon, Kayla corrected. It's a cave, like Batman. Dave winked at me. See? They get it. Dust rained down whenever the kids jumped too hard upstairs, but Dave just brushed it off and kept talking. Somehow he made it look cozy. Over time, as the kids outgrew their toys, we cleared the playroom and replaced it with a couple of couches, a TV, and eventually an Xbox. The whole basement shifted from child's kingdom to man's cave, a place where Dave ruled comfortably. No wonder he never wanted to leave. Tracy took some convincing. At first, the idea of a grown man living in the basement rubbed her the wrong way. But Dave, with his easy humor and willingness to pitch in, won her over. He'd mow the lawn, shovel snow, fix squeaky hinges, and keep the kids entertained for hours. Before long, she was shaking her head with a smile when he came stomping up the basement stairs, ducking under the frame like a giant sneaking into a dollhouse. Dinner ready? He'd ask cheerfully. You think this is a restaurant? She'd shoot back. He'd grin. Best one in town. And the truth was, I'd slipped back into one of my old hobbies, cooking. Every night I threw something together for the family, and Dave reaped the benefits. He joked that he was the luckiest roommate alive. His own cave, all the comforts of home, and a chef upstairs. One night, after the kids had gone to bed, we sat downstairs in Dave's cave, the TV casting flickering light on the brick walls. He was scribbling in a notebook, something unusual for him. What's that? I asked. Study notes, he said. For what? He looked up, almost shy. Thinking about trucking school. Big rigs, long haul, good money. I raised my eyebrows. You serious? Why not? I'm too big for cubicles. Bricks aren't forever, but trucks? Trucks will keep rolling. I grinned. From the throne to the open road, huh? He laughed, slapping his notebook shut. Exactly. And just like that, the cave became more than a hideout. It became the launch pad for his next chapter. Looking back, it amazes me how he made that basement his home. A sagging ceiling, a cold cement floor, and a toilet in the middle of the room, and Dave turned it into a fortress of comfort, laughter, and plans. For 5 years, Dave's cave wasn't just a room in my house. It was proof that he could make the best out of anything. Chapter 4. Dave's cave had been the launch pad. From there, he studied, tested, and eventually earned his trucker's license. At first, it was short hauls, runs between Ottawa and Montreal, deliveries into southern Ontario, just enough to pay bills and build a reputation. He came home with stories of bad coffee at highway diners, snow chains biting into frozen roads, and long nights with nothing but static-filled radio to keep him company. Then, he caught his break. A good job came through, delivering brand new trucks across Canada and into the United States. He'd load up a bed with 2 or 3 gleaming rigs stacked like toys and haul them to dealerships, shipping yards, and ports. He loved the open road, the size of the machines, the feeling of freedom in every mile. I even rode along with him once, all the way to St. John's, Newfoundland. We drove through rolling farmland, long stretches of highway where trees swallowed the horizon, and winding coastal roads that clung to cliffsides. We told stories, sang to the radio, ate greasy diner food, and laughed until our sides hurt. It was the kind of trip that sticks in your bones. Simple, but unforgettable. But it was also on this job that I first began to suspect something about Dave. something beyond good instincts or luck. Dave was a big man, and like a lot of big men, he hated seatbelts. He always said they cut into his side, made him feel trapped. I can count on one hand the times I saw him buckle up, except for that one run. He was hauling 3 brand new white cabovers, stacked one on top of the other, heading east on a stretch of highway. Out of nowhere, another truck came barreling up behind him, way too fast, and slammed into the back of his load. The impact was like a bomb going off. Metal shrieked. Tires screamed. Dave told me later that he ducked, clutching the wheel with every ounce of strength, just in time. The front axle of the top cabover came loose, ripped forward, and tore the roof clean off his cab. It passed within millimeters of his skull. If he'd sat upright for even half a second longer, his head would have been gone. When the dust settled, the cab looked like a can opener had peeled it apart. Dave crawled out with one broken arm, bruised ribs, and a look in his eyes that never quite went away. The doctors called it luck. I called it something else. At the hospital, I finally asked him, "How did you know to duck? Most guys would have frozen. You were strapped in too. I've never seen you wear a seatbelt in your life, and on that one trip, you're buckled in from start to finish. How did you know?" He looked at me groggy from painkillers, and for once, the jokes were gone. He shifted in the bed, eyes distant, and said, "I've known things since I was a kid. Things I shouldn't know. You're not going to believe this, but when I was 5, some monks came to see me." I thought he was joking, but he wasn't smiling. His voice slowed, heavy with both drugs and memory. They spread out a blanket with objects on it, told me to pick the one I knew belonged to them. And I knew. I saw it in my head before they even spoke. But I picked wrong. On purpose. They scared me, with their shaved heads and the way they looked at me, like I was something they owned. I knew if I chose right, they'd take me away, so I pointed to something else. They frowned, left me there. He closed his eyes, drifting, but before sleep took him, he added, "I've seen things ever since, not just guesses. I know when to move, when to duck, when to hide. It's not luck, Don, it's something else." Then he was out, and the room was quiet except for the beeping of the monitors. I sat there, the weight of his words sinking in. Maybe it was the morphine talking. Maybe it was a half-baked story from a man half asleep. But deep down, I knew better. I'd seen it in the way he lived, in the way he avoided accidents, and seemed to sense danger before it arrived. This wasn't luck. It was the first time I heard him say it out loud. The gift he carried, the burden he'd kept to himself since childhood. And it was only the beginning. Chapter 5. It was around this time that all our lives started to change. Tracy and I weren't getting along anymore. The cracks had been spreading for years, small arguments that grew into bigger ones, resentments that no longer hid under the rug. Scott was on the edge of adulthood, ready for college but unwilling to go. He was bright, full of ideas, but restless, not sure what path was his. Dave, meanwhile, had gone back to brickwork. The trucking job had ended after the accident, and though he still joked about his hidden throne days, I could see the weight on him. He missed his family and friends back in Oil Springs. Ottawa was beginning to feel like someone else's town. Even the house itself seemed to shift beneath us. We lived in a duplex. Our side marked strictly residential only, which meant the health department and the mayor's office breathing down my neck for running the tattoo shop at home. But the other half of the house, owned by a neighbor, was zoned residential business. She was planning to move and rent it out, but the place was big and she worried about finding tenants. I made an offhand suggestion one day that she should convert it into boarding rooms. Rent out the first and second floors, add shared kitchens and bathrooms. Not only would she make steady money, but the neighborhood, full of broke families and workers scraping by, would benefit from affordable rooms. And then I said the words that would change everything. And the basement? Let me take the basement for Mad Hatter Tattoos. Separate entrance. Business license legit. You'll have steady rent, and I'll finally get the mayor's office and health inspector off my back. She thought about it, and then she agreed. Dave was hired by her to paint, lay carpets, and generally get the upstairs rooms ready for tenants. But most of our energy went into the basement, transforming it into a real tattoo shop that could pass health and safety regulations. New flooring, fresh drywall, proper sinks, For once, it wasn't me trying to jury rig something out of scraps. We were building it the right way. When it was finally finished, I set up a small room in the back beside the washroom for myself. An office, technically, but also a bed against one wall, a little kitchen nook with a microwave and bar fridge, a desk and computer. It was cramped, but it was mine. When Tracy and I finally split for good, that's where I moved. The shop doubled as my home, and for the first time in a long time, I felt like I was moving forward instead of treading water. Dave, though, stayed in Tracy's basement for a while longer, uneasy about the whole situation. He wasn't comfortable in the middle of our split. Out of nowhere, he and Scott came up with a plan. Attend college together in Sarnia, just a short drive from Dave's childhood home in Oil Springs. It made sense. Scott needed direction, and Dave wanted to be closer to his roots. And so, almost overnight, they were gone. For 3 years, I only saw them at Christmas and the odd holiday. They'd return with stories of classes, roommates, and a campus deli called Alfie's, famous for sandwiches so big you could feed a small family off one. Scott dropped out eventually and came back home, restless as ever. But Dave stayed. He met a girl, got a gastric bypass that changed his life, got married, and when the weight came off, he started wearing Superman t-shirts. Every day, without fail. Blue, black, red, faded or new, always that S on his chest. It became his uniform, his armor, the way he wanted the world to see him. It was also during those years that Dave started sharing stranger stories. He'd call me up, sometimes late at night, and talk about dreams that came true or feelings he couldn't shake. Once, he told me about a car accident before it happened. "Stay off Bank Street tomorrow morning," he warned me. Something bad. I laughed it off, but the next day I heard about a multi-car pileup right where he'd said. Another time, he got quiet during a family dinner, his fork hovering over his plate. "Something's wrong," he muttered. Minutes later, the phone rang. A friend had been hospitalized. I tried to explain it away as coincidence, but deep down, I knew better. Then came the science study. Some college researchers were offering cash to anyone willing to participate in a remote viewing experiment. Dave signed up, half for the curiosity, half for the $150 they promised. They'd put him in a quiet room, hand him a sealed envelope with coordinates inside, and ask him to sketch whatever came to mind. He told me later, grinning, that he drew a suspension bridge, arcing cables, steel towers, the whole works. When the researchers opened the envelope, the coordinates pointed to the Golden Gate Bridge in San Francisco. Dave shrugged it off like it was nothing, pocketed the cash, and laughed. Best easy money I ever made. But I knew, and the researchers knew too. Looking back, that was the hinge on which things began to turn. Dave, living in Sarnia, Superman shirts on his back, marriage ahead of him, already testing a gift most people would deny exists. A gift that, before long, would catch the attention of people far beyond college researchers. And once they had their eye on him, there would be no going back. Chapter 6. Dave never did anything the way people expected. When he went back to school in Sarnia, everyone thought it would be a slow grind. 4 years to get an engineering degree, maybe 5. Not Dave. He hammered through it in 3, finishing ahead of schedule, shouldering the work with the same stubborn determination he once used to muscle furniture into Dave's cave. When he told me he had a job lined up, I expected something like construction or design work. Instead, he grinned and said, "Ducks Unlimited." "Ducks Unlimited?" I repeated, raising an eyebrow. "Yep, officially, I blow up beaver dams." He delivered the line with a straight face, and for a moment I bought it. The idea of him out there with dynamite and waiters was too perfect. "That's the coolest damn job I've ever heard of," I said. "You're like a redneck superhero." He just laughed, but something in his eyes gave me pause. It was the kind of look that said, "That's what I can tell you, but not the whole truth." Later, I'd learned that Ducks Unlimited was just a cover, and his real employer was CSIS, the Canadian Security Intelligence Service, not the kind of job you ever saw in the classifieds. Back then, though, all I had were suspicions. Dave and Jenna, his fiancée at the time, moved out west, settling in a small town in northern Alberta. They married quickly, and not long after, Jenna was pregnant with their first child. When Lincoln was born, Dave was transformed. I had seen him proud before, hauling in a base the size of his arm, showing off a new tattoo, bragging about some clever fix, but nothing compared to the way he lit up holding that baby boy. It wasn't long before father and son had a uniform, matching Superman shirts. For Dave, it was his badge, the symbol he'd worn since his surgery. For Lincoln, it was tiny onesies with the same red S stretched across his chest. Together, they looked like a team, a big Superman and his little sidekick. Those were good days, though not without their challenges. Dave's job kept him on the road, or in the bush, for weeks at a time. Jenna managed the household while he disappeared into the wild, returning with vague stories of field work and water management that never quite added up. Whenever he came home, though, he poured himself into his family. I remember one photo, Dave in his Superman shirt, Lincoln in his, both of them grinning like they owned the world. That was Dave's pride and joy, right there in his arms. It was also around this time that I began to reflect on the other side of Dave, the one most people didn't see. Back in his bigger days before the surgery, we'd sometimes sneak out for boys' nights. We both came from alcoholic families, so we knew the pitfalls. We also knew our limits. We were big men who could hold our liquor, and for the most part, we drank responsibly. Still, there were a few stupors, wild, reckless nights where the stories grew louder and the laughs came easier. But after the bypass, everything changed. One beer would knock Dave flat. His body couldn't handle alcohol anymore, and as far as I knew, he swore it off. He treated booze like poison. At least, that's what I believed. Later, Jenna would tell me otherwise. That sometimes, when the house was quiet and Lincoln was asleep, Dave would slip. A beer here, a shot there. Not often, not enough to turn him back into the man his family feared, but enough to show the cracks he tried so hard to keep hidden. Looking back, it was a time of transitions. Dave, now a father and a husband, working a job that sounded simple but reeked of secrecy. Me, trying to keep my shop alive while my family life unraveled. Scott bouncing back from college, unsure where to land. All of us were in motion, moving towards something larger we couldn't yet see. And through it all, Dave's instincts, those strange, uncanny premonitions, only seemed to sharpen. He never bragged about them, but there were moments. Small things at first. He'd tell Jenna not to take a certain back road because it didn't feel right, only for a crash to snarl traffic there hours later. He'd duck under a beam just before someone dropped it. He'd stop Lincoln from touching something seconds before it tipped. Coincidence? Maybe. But I was already convinced it was more. That was the edge of the chapter we were standing on. Family, career, secrets, and a gift that would no longer stay in the shadows. Chapter 7: The Return of a Changed Man. By the time Lincoln was learning to toddle, Dave had already begun to change. It wasn't obvious at first. He still came home with that same big grin, still wore his Superman shirts like armor, still lifted Lincoln in the air until the boy squealed with laughter. But behind his eyes, something new lingered, like a man carrying a story he couldn't tell. When he invited me out west for a visit, I jumped at it. It had been too long since we'd spent real time together, and besides, I wanted to see with my own eyes how life had shaped him. The plane ride was a cramped misery. Wedged between two strangers who both seemed to think the armrests belonged exclusively to them, I folded myself into the seat and prayed for the hours to pass quickly. By the time we landed in Alberta, my knees ached and my patience was thin. Dave picked me up at the airport, grinning like it had been a week instead of years. "You look like you wrestled a grizzly in that seat," he laughed, clapping me on the back. "Grizzly won," I muttered. At his house, I found myself bunking in Lincoln's room. Cute setup, little bed, toys scattered everywhere, glow-in-the-dark stars on the ceiling. The catch? Lincoln still woke often, and Jenna, the dutiful mother, checked on him like clockwork. Every hour, the door creaked open, and there I was, stretched out in full pajamas, something I never wore at home. Normally I slept in shorts or nothing at all, but the thought of Jenna walking in unannounced had me sweating in flannel like it was the dead of winter. Dave found it hilarious. "You look like a convict in those," he whispered one night, trying not to laugh. "Shut up," I hissed, tugging the blanket up to my chin. The highlight of the trip came when Dave insisted we all spend a full day at West Edmonton Mall. I'd heard of it, of course, but nothing prepared me for the sheer size of the place. It was like someone had taken a carnival, a zoo, a shopping district, and a theme park, and crammed it all under one roof. We rode the indoor roller coaster, our laughter echoing through the cavernous space. Lincoln's eyes went wide at the water park, where waves crashed against an artificial beach, and he squealed in delight on the kiddie rides. We stuffed ourselves with greasy food court burgers, pretzels, and ice cream, drifting from arcade games to novelty shops like kids ourselves. For one perfect day, life was simple: laughter, food, family, and fun. That night, after Jenna carried a sleepy Lincoln upstairs, Dave and I lingered in the backyard. The fire pit crackled, flames snapping and dancing in the cool air. He pulled out 2 cigars, cheap ones, but good enough, and handed me one. "You don't even smoke," I said, lighting up. "Sometimes you just need the ritual," he replied, puffing until the ember glowed. We sat in silence for a while, the smoke curling into the dark. Then Dave leaned back, exhaling slowly. His face flickered orange in the firelight, shadows making his eyes look older than they should have. "You know Ducks Unlimited?" he said suddenly. "Yeah," I smirked. "You're out there blowing up beaver dams like a superhero." He chuckled, but it faded quick. "It's bullshit." I turned to him, curious. "It's CSIS?" he said finally. "CSES. Canadian Security Intelligence Service." I laughed at first, thinking it was another one of his jokes. But he wasn't laughing. He stared into the fire, jaw tight. "They took me up north," he went on. "Way, way north. Past where roads end. Military base, snow for miles. Soldiers everywhere. Canadian, American, German, Russian. Not just us. The whole damn world was there. And me, this fat kid from Oil Springs, standing in the middle of it all like I was supposed to belong." I stayed quiet, that letting him talk. "They put me in a room," he said. "Plain walls, table, chair, one-way mirror. I couldn't see through, but I knew eyes were on me. Watching, studying, maybe not even human eyes. Who the hell knows?" He tapped ash into the fire, shoulders tense. "They gave me envelopes, coordinates, told me to describe what I saw, and Dawn." He turned his eyes on me, steady and serious. "I saw things. Not guesses. Not dreams. Things I shouldn't have been able to know." I felt the hairs on my arms rise. And I knew I wasn't the only one. There were others too. Maybe in other rooms, maybe on the other side of that glass. Silence stretched between us, the fire popping softly. Then, in that half serious, half joking way he had, Dave leaned back and said, "If I ever turn up dead, it's not me. Just remember that." He smiled as he said it, but his eyes didn't smile. That was the first time he joked about his own death. It wouldn't be the last. And sitting there in the glow of the fire, cigar smoke in my throat, I realized just how far down the rabbit hole my friend had gone, and how much farther he still had to fall. Chapter 8. The Tall Ones. After that night at the fire pit, nothing felt the same. Dave had cracked the door open, just a little, and I'd caught a glimpse of something bigger than either of us. He still laughed, still wore his Superman shirts, still played the proud dad, but behind the humor, I could see a man splitting his life in two. One half was for his family and friends. The other half was locked away in rooms with one-way mirrors. And Dave never spoke about it over the phone. His dad had started coming to Ottawa for surgeries. He was older now, in and out of the hospital for days at a time, and that gave Dave an excuse to visit the city. One afternoon he called me, his voice low and oddly formal. "I'm going to be in town a week. Want to grab a beer?" "Sure," I said. "Meet me where we met," he said. The way he said it, measured, suspicious, sent a prickle down my neck. "Okay," I answered, though by now, where we met wasn't a day labor line anymore. Years had passed. The spot was just a shabby Chinese food takeout, the kind of place with buzzing neon and a cracked tile floor. I stood outside, waiting. The owner popped out every 2 minutes, scowling. "No loitering." "I'm waiting for a friend," I said. He crossed his arms. "No loitering." The third time, I was ready to snap, to tell him off, when I felt a presence behind me. "Follow me," Dave whispered as he walked by, not breaking stride. I turned, gave the shop owner the finger, and fell in step a few paces behind him. Close enough to talk, but not side by side. "What's going on?" I asked. "Shh, not here," Dave muttered. We rounded a corner and ducked into a strip club of all places. Paid our cover, grabbed beers, and before I knew it, Dave had the attention of a blonde dancer. "Private room, both of us," he said. "Double your rate." Her eyes widened. "Money talks." She led us upstairs to a dark champagne room on the second floor, the bass from the main stage thudding through the walls. Once inside, Dave peeled off 2 crisp hundreds, handed them to her, and said, "Sit over there. 10 minutes. Don't listen. Don't come close." She shrugged, walked across the room, and settled into a couch under the flashing colored lights. Music pounded loud enough to blur words at any distance. Dave sat forward, beer in hand, his face tight with worry. He turned to me. "Dawn, you're my best friend. I'll understand if you say no, but I have a favor to ask you." I looked him square in the eyes. "Anything, buddy. You know that." He swallowed hard. "I want you to keep a record for me, a record of my life. And if anything ever happens to me, you give it to Lincoln when he turns 20. I laughed nervously. "Yeah, okay, buddy. I'll get right on that." His tone snapped sharp. "No, I'm serious." I froze. "This remote viewing stuff, it's freaking me out." His eyes darted to the walls, the mirrors, like even here we weren't safe. Then he leaned in close. "I'll meet you at your shop tonight, after midnight. Leave the door open. When you get home, don't let anyone in. Stay closed. I'll see you tonight." I nodded, more shaken than I let on. The 10 minutes were up. Dave waved the dancer over, slipped her another 100, and leaned back for a lap dance. I finished my beer, stood up, and in a voice loud enough for anyone listening, I called out, "See ya, buddy." Then I walked out, heart hammering. Back at my shop, time moved like molasses. Midnight was hours away, and every tick of the clock felt like a drumbeat in my chest. I puttered around the front room, wiping down counters that were already clean, adjusting framed artwork that didn't need adjusting. I opened my computer, tried to distract myself with shows, but I couldn't focus. The words blurred. Every creak in the walls made me glance at the door. I thought about Dave's eyes back in that champagne room. Haunted, urgent. The way his voice had dropped when he said, "This remote viewing stuff is freaking me out." The way he had made me promise. And I thought about Lincoln, tiny, innocent, with no idea what his father was tangled up in. The hours dragged. 11:15, 11:37. I sat in the dark shop, the hum of the computer screen painting my face blue, waiting for the knock that never came. Chapter 9, Midnight Confession. The minutes crawled past midnight, and still no Dave. My nerves were frayed raw. Every sound outside, a car rolling by, footsteps on the sidewalk, the wind rattling the shop sign, set me on edge. By 12:30 I was pacing. By 1 I was sure he wasn't coming. Maybe it had been a mistake, maybe someone had followed him, maybe. Then came the soft rap on the door. 3 knocks. I jumped, froze, and then hurried over. Dave slipped inside quick, shutting the door behind him, twisting the deadbolt until it clicked. Without a word, he moved through the shop, switched off the lights one by one until the front was cloaked in darkness, and only the dim glow of my computer screen remained. "Sorry I'm late," he muttered, shrugging out of his jacket. His face was tired, drawn, but his eyes darted, alert. Had to make sure I wasn't followed. I handed him a steaming mug of coffee. His big hands wrapped around it like it was the only warm thing in the world. He sank into the chair opposite me, the shadows deep around his face, and for the first time that night, he exhaled like a man who'd been holding his breath for hours. "All right," he said at last. "Now I can talk." "Dawn, I want you to remember what I say. Don't write it down, don't record it, and for God's sake, make sure all security and private cameras are off." I got up and walked the shop, yanking plugs, shutting off power strips, and even pulling my personal GoPro from under the tattoo bench. I set it on the table in front of him. "Good?" he said. "It's a shit show, Dawn. There are aliens living on Earth, at least 3 different kinds, and they all hate each other. Every one of them is working with militaries around the world, trading pieces of alien tech for security and sanctuary." My throat went dry. "How do you know?" "Because I've seen them," Dave said flatly. "I've talked to them. I've had tours of their living quarters." He took a sip of coffee and leaned in. "They took me to a base up north," he whispered. "Way, way up. Past anything you'd find on a map. Before they brought me inside, they gave me instructions. How to act when I met our guests. Be careful of your thoughts, they said. Not your words, Dawn, your thoughts. They communicate through telekinesis. Every stray idea, every little judgment, they hear it." His eyes went far away. "My handler introduced me to one of them, a tall white named Fong. That's the name he gave me. Fong, the representative." Dave chuckled once, nervously. "I tried a joke when we first met, couldn't help myself. Fong just looked at me, confused at first. Then his voice slid right into my head. Ah, humor! How do you say? Good one. Dave smirked, shaking his head at the memory. Fong offered to show me their living quarters, said we'd take the elevator down to their floor. But before the doors opened, he warned me. The gravity is lower here. You may feel, how do you say it? Seasick. Dave snorted. That one stung. I'm a fisherman, Don. I've cast and reeled in swells that would turn most men green. But I didn't argue, just waited. He grew serious. When the doors opened, I damn near lost it. Lightheaded, stomach twisting, like the floor was tilting under me. I held it back, but barely. Fong, on the other hand, he let out this sigh of relief, like he'd finally stepped into his own skin. Their quarters looked ordinary at first. Kitchens, cafeterias, they cook, they eat, just like us. But then he took me into their work area. Rows of what looked like computers, except there were no screens. Just blank consoles. The tall whites stood in front of them, not touching a thing, eyes fixed forward like they were staring into a void. No keyboards, no mice, no displays. Just thought and machine, talking directly. Dave rubbed his hands together, his eyes flicking toward the dark windows, as if expecting someone to be out there listening. But Don, they're exercise rooms. I gotta tell you about those. He leaned closer. They work out in the nude, all of them, and they love our treadmills and stationary bikes. Picture it, 8-foot-tall porcelain giants running laps on a Bowflex. A strained laugh escaped him. Fong caught me staring at one of the females. Couldn't help it. She was striking, graceful. I started to apologize, but he put his long hand on my arm. In my head, I heard him. Please, no. You'll make her day. Our females make a sport out of bragging how many and how long they can get the humans to stare at them. Dave let out a short laugh of disbelief. Then he added, Look, you've caught her eye. And sure enough, she tilted her head, watching me, playful as a cat. I stared a little longer, then gave her a wave. She tilted her head again, acknowledgement clear. Fong only said, Shall we continue? Like it was the most normal thing in the world. Dave took another swallow of coffee and rubbed his temples. Later, after the tour, Fong sat me down on a couch in their lounge. Don, it wasn't like any couch you've ever felt. Low gravity, soft as clouds. You don't sit on it. You sink, and it lifts you up at the same time. I could have stayed there forever. They brought us drinks. One of the younger females served us. She called herself Pony. Dave's eyes flickered with something between awe and unease. She looked right at me, handed me the glass, and thought into my head as clear as speech. My mother is bragging that she got your attention for 7 minutes and 3 seconds. Then Pony smiled, smirked really, and added, I could hold it longer. And with that, she turned and walked away. He shook his head. Don, they measure things like eye contact like it's a sport. To them, we're entertainment. And they don't hide it. I sat there in the dark shop, coffee cooling in my hands, my mind spinning. Part of me wanted to laugh, to tell him he'd lost it. Another part, the part that had known Dave for years, that trusted him with my life, knew he wasn't making this up. I couldn't decide whether to be terrified or amazed. And the look in his eyes told me he hadn't even begun to tell me everything. Chapter 10, The Ledger. We sat there a long time, me with cold coffee, Dave with a white knuckle grip on the empty mug like it might float away if he let go. The shop was a cave, front lights off, the blue wash of my monitor the only glow. Tattoo needles and ink caps looked like alien tools in the dim. Fitting, I guess. Okay, he said at last, like a diver deciding to go deeper. Ground rules. For what? For staying alive. He said it without drama, which somehow made it worse. He leaned forward, forearms on his knees, that big frame folded into a shape that looked almost small. If you're going to keep the record for me, you're going to do it my way. Your way, I echoed, trying to make my voice steady. No phones, he said. No cloud, no email, no thumb drives, no scanning, no photos. You write it longhand. Ballpoint, not gel. I almost laughed. You have a thing against gel pens. They smear, he said. Ballpoint bites the paper. If someone copies pages, I want to feel the difference with my fingers, not just see it. Paranoid? He smiled thinly. Yes, we're past maybe on that. He reached into his jacket, peeled back the lining, and pulled a small brown notebook wrapped in wax paper. He laid it on the table like it might be hot. It had no brand, just a faint blind stamp rectangle where a logo should have been. Paper's rag, he said. Cotton. Doesn't rot easy. Your job is to write what I tell you, when I tell you, and to stash it 3 different ways. 3? One copy here, hidden where even you don't look. One copy at your place, inside something no one would think to open. And one copy you'll keep sealed, address written, postage on, ready to mail to yourself if you get that feeling. Do not put my name on the envelope. To myself, I said, still trying to catch up. If they intercept something to me, they'll open it, he said. If they intercept something to you, they might shrug. They who? He didn't answer. Didn't have to. Instead, he slid another object across the table. At first, I thought it was a coin, but it wasn't. No minting. Brushed metal, satin dull, about the size of a toonie but thinner. On one face, a shallow groove spiraled inward the way water curls in a drain. On the other, nothing. Perfect nothing. Feel it, he said. It was colder than the room had any right to be. What is it? A pass, he said, and then added, or bait. Depends who's holding it. Where did you? Don, he said. Just my name. A quiet guardrail. I set the not coin back on the table. It made no sound when it touched wood. That rattled me more than I liked. Why me? I asked. Why not Jenna? Or one of your CSIS buddies? Or, because you don't scare easy, he said. Because you already think I'm crazy and you still show up. Because if I vanish, you'll do what I ask, not what feels good. What exactly are you asking? Keep the ledger. He said, tell Lincoln when he's 20. Not before. Not after. 20. If I'm gone, he gets the story, not the theories. If I'm here, he gets his father, not a ghost. He rotated his wrist, and for the first time I noticed a puckered patch of skin just above the watch strap. Not a knife cut, not a burn I recognized. It was the kind of scar that looks like the skin gave up arguing and settled for existing. What happened there? Cold light, he said. Cold light. You know when you open a freezer and the air bites? He said. Imagine that, but it shines. And when it stops shining, it takes a little of you with it. I swallowed. The room felt smaller. You said there were 3 kinds, I said, just to say something. The tall whites and... He shook his head. Not now. Pieces, not the whole puzzle. That's the other rule. You don't trust me. I trust you, he said, and gave me a look that landed like a hand on my chest. I don't trust whoever might be listening when you remember later. He took the not coin back and palmed it. It disappeared the way a magic trick disappears. Not gone, just somewhere you aren't looking. Show me, I said. Something I can't explain. He studied me like he was weighing costs. Then he nodded once. Fine. In the drawer under your inks, front left, there's a box of loose cartridges, yeah? Yeah. Inside that box, he said, there's a wrapped candy. Green wrapper. The watermelon kind you keep for kids too dumb to know it tastes like perfume. I snorted despite myself. Rude. Open it, he said. I reached into the drawer, fishing past bottles and rubber bands and a coil of guitar string I swore I'd throw out. The little cardboard box was where it always was. I tipped it into my palm and a scatter of black cartridges clacked onto the table. Mixed among them, a fat green wrapper glowed radioactive. Watermelon. I didn't like how my scalp felt. I didn't like that he was right. The candy had been in that box for months, but I'd forgotten it existed. Lucky guess, I said, and heard how thin I sounded. Sure, he said. Lucky. Do it again. He looked toward the window, eyes going far, not unfocused, sharp on a point I couldn't see. Your back room, he said. Under the bed, to the left, in the dust, an old key on a red tag. You don't remember where it came from. You keep telling yourself you'll throw it out and you don't. That one punched somewhere private. I'd vacuumed yesterday, and in a hurry I'd kicked a red tag under the bed and told myself I'd get it later. I hadn't. Dave, I said. It came out a whisper. Dawn? He replied softly. I don't like doing parlor tricks. Makes me feel like a liar even when I'm telling the truth. Then why? Because you asked, he said. Because later I'm going to ask you to do something, and I need you to believe me now. We let the silence sit. The shop had a hum I hadn't noticed before, a low line of current, refrigerator, ballast, monitor fan, that came together into a single note the way a choir does when they breathe at the same time. What do they want? I asked. Which they? He said, and the way he said it told me there were more than one answer. The tall ones. To win, he said. Then, after a beat, whatever win means to a species that doesn't blink unless it chooses to. And the others? A different win, he said. Think of 3 grandmasters playing chess on the same board with pieces you can't see. What are we, the board? He smirked without humor. We're the pawns that think we're players. He checked his watch. Not digital. Old analog with a sunburst face that made his scar look smaller by comparison. I can't stay long. You just got here. Staying isn't the same as safe, he said. I looped city center twice and swapped cars at Carling. I don't know if that matters anymore. My skin crawled. I got the sudden irrational feeling that if I turned too fast, I'd see two silhouettes in the glass, not one. Tell me about Pony, I said, and I regretted it as soon as it left my mouth. He blinked. The question hit somewhere he hadn't braced. She's young, he said. Young for them. They don't measure age like we do. They measure attention. Someone told her I was interesting. He shifted. I don't know if that's good. You said her mother bragged. They brag about hold times, he said, and his mouth twisted. How long they can keep a mind without touching it, like weightlifting, like a personal best. And you were, what, heavy? He didn't laugh. I was new. I rubbed my face with both hands until stars rolled in my vision. You said there were rules, I said. Pieces, not the whole, no phones, no gel pens. What else? Code phrases, he said. If I text you West Gate, it means don't answer and go to ground for 24 hours. If I text you where we met, you go to a public place with cameras and sit with your back to a wall. If I say tap twice, it means someone else is in the room. You keep talking like we're telling jokes, and you don't ask questions you know I can't answer. Do I get to pick a code phrase? Sure, he said. Pick something no one could guess, but you could say out loud without sounding like a lunatic. Tattoo your mother? I offered. He snorted. That one you cannot say out loud. We both smiled, and for a second we were just two idiots in a dark shop making fun of death. Then his face changed. He tilted his head the way a dog does when it hears something far away. The hair along my arms lifted. You hear that? I whispered. Not a sound, he said. A pressure. What does that mean? Probably nothing, he lied. He stood without scraping the chair. For a big man, he could move like a roomer. He padded to the front door and looked at it the way a carpenter looks at a board he doesn't trust. He put the flat of one hand against the wood, then took it away. I shouldn't have come to the front, he said. Back is better. You think someone. If I thought, I wouldn't be here, he said. Thinking gets you paranoid. Feeling gets you home. He came back to the table, scooped up the rag paper notebook, then shook his head and set it down again, pushing it toward me. Yours, he said. Start with what you remember from tonight. Not what you think. What you remember. Different. I'll write it when you leave. Write while I'm here, he said, and his voice went quiet but adamant. Sometimes memory is a live animal. It chews through its leash if you don't pet it. I found a pen. Ballpoint. He nodded like that mattered. I dated the page and started with the door. 3 knocks. Deadbolt click. Lights going out one by one. I wrote his words without polishing them, the way a court stenographer might if the court were a basement shop and the witness smelled like road dust and coffee. While I wrote, he walked the room like he was reading a map only he could see, eyeing corners, looking up into vents, counting silently. He paused at the autoclave and rested his fingertips on the lid, as if greeting an old ally. Then he moved on. You asked what they want, he said, not looking at me. Yes. They want to know if we can learn, he said. We think we're the ones studying them. We're the mice. They're the lab. Learn what? How to steer, he said simply. Not cars, not planes, probability. He turned, watching me watch him. If you nudge a man a fraction of a thought, he takes the left instead of the right, and 5 years later, he never meets the woman who would have had the daughter who would have cured the thing that would have killed the thing that would have ended the thing. He spread his big hands. That's a lot of power for a head tilt. Like Pony, I said. I hated how small my voice sounded. Like Pony, he agreed. I finished a page and a half, and the words were starting to collapse into each other. He came beside me and read over my shoulder, then tapped a line. Change they told me to I was told, he said. Objective voice reads like a log. Logs get less attention. People skim them. Skimming can save your life. I made the change. The pen left a little crater in the cotton paper. He checked his watch again. I have to go. Now? He nodded. Now. What about... I glanced at the door. The pressure. He smiled, an apology and a promise tucked into the same curve. Pressure's always there, he said. Trick is not letting it pick you. He pulled his jacket on, then hesitated. From an inside pocket, he took a folded index card and set it on the table. On the blank side, a single line of numbers ran from left to right, broken into groups by dashes. Not a phone number, not an address. What's this? Coordinates, he said. For practice. Practice what? Looking, he said. You won't see much, maybe none. That's fine. The point isn't to be right in the chest. The point is to sit still long enough to know whether the picture in your head is yours. You want me to try remote viewing. I want you to learn when your thoughts are being tugged, he said. If you can feel the difference, you can keep what's yours. He reached for the door, stopped, and came back to touch my shoulder. Just 2 fingers, brief and steady. If I text Westgate, you burn the copy here and the one at your place, and you mail the sealed one. Then you wait. 2 weeks. If you don't hear from me, you tell Kayla I'm an idiot who loved her father. Tell Robinette I still owe her a birthday dinner, and tell Scott I kept his first drawing in my wallet for 10 years. You're talking like... I'm talking like we don't get to choose when we say goodbye, he said. Dave? Don, he answered. My best friend. He squeezed, then let go. He slipped through the back hall and disappeared down the service stairs into the alley. I waited, counting silent Mississippi seconds, then padded to the back door and cracked it with my foot. The alley was empty. The air smelled like cold metal and yesterday's rain. When I came back in, the shop had shifted again. Same chair, same autoclave, same blue hiss of the monitor. Different weight. I sat. The index card looked like a dare. I flipped it over. The numbers meant nothing and everything. I put the card under the notebook, took the pen, and wrote 2 more sentences. Dave arrived at 1:07 a.m. Dave left at 1:54 a.m. Then I pressed the notebook shut and held it closed with my palm until my heartbeat slowed under the leather like it was trying to push its way inside. That was when the front door rattled. Just once. A tired, ordinary door rattle, the kind you make when you test the handle before you remember the sign says closed. I didn't breathe. I didn't move. The rattle didn't come again. I sat there a long time, listening to the autoclave tick in the corner, the way machines tick after they cool. The hum pulled apart into its pieces, fridge, ballast, fan, and became a room again. Only then did I realize I was still touching the place on my shoulder where he'd pressed 2 fingers. It felt warm and cold at the same time. I opened the notebook, wrote 1 more line in the narrow space at the bottom of the page. I believe him. Then I turned off the monitor, and in the sudden dark, I heard my own breath and something that might have been silence or might have been the world moving 1 notch to the left. Outside, somewhere far away and too close, a siren rose and fell. Inside, the ink dried. The ledger had begun. Chapter 11, The 3 Factions. Dave came back 2 nights later. He didn't bother with small talk this time. Just slipped through the back door of the shop and dropped into the same chair like it had been waiting for him. His eyes were rimmed red, his face tired. You wanted the bigger picture, he said. Yeah. I pushed a mug toward him and flipped open the notebook. You keep giving me puzzle pieces. Time to show me the picture on the box. He let out a humorless laugh. Fair enough. He wrapped his hands around the mug, warming them. But once I say this out loud, you don't get to unknow it. Got that? Got it, I said, pen ready. There are 3 groups, 3 kinds. Each one has its own agenda, and they hate each other. Hate isn't even strong enough a word. They'd wipe each other out tomorrow if they could. He lifted 1 big finger. The Greys. You know the stereotype. Big heads, bug eyes, spindly bodies. Everyone jokes about them. Movies, T-shirts, X-Files. But Dawn, they're real, and they're worse than the jokes. He leaned forward, his voice low. They eat us. Not in some symbolic way. Dinner. We're cattle to them. My stomach lurched. I've seen enough. I've heard the rest. They don't even deny it when they talk among themselves. Domination, extinction, consumption, that's their mission statement. I scribbled down the words. Domination, extinction, dinner. My pen shook. But here's the thing, Dave continued. Everybody thinks they're gods, omnipotent, perfect. They're not. Fong told me the truth once when no one else was around. The Greys are only scary because they're old. Oldest race anyone knows. They've had their technology for so long they don't even understand it anymore. They use it like a redneck kid with a Ferrari. Clumsy. Reckless. Still lethal, but not infallible. I let out a breath I didn't know I'd been holding. So, dangerous, but not invincible. Exactly. Drunk men with guns. They've got the Axis militaries in their corner, Russia, China, shadow states. That's the board. He lifted a second finger. The Anunnaki. His mouth twisted into something halfway between a grimace and a sneer. The tall whites call them cousins. Second cousins, to be exact. Family you can't get rid of but wish you could. They're built like gods and act like overlords. They don't see us as equals, Don. They see us as property. Slaves. Assets. I felt the back of my neck prickle. They've been here before. Ancient Mesopotamia, Egypt, Babylon. Those old myths about gods walking among men. That was them. They put us to work, made us mine their metals, build their monuments. And they want it back. Every bit of it. I wrote quickly, my pen scratching the page. And the whites? For the first time, Dave's tone softened. The tall whites. These are the ones I deal with. The allies. Canada, the US, NATO, they side with them. They're not saints. Don't ever think that. But they're different. They don't want to eat us. They don't want to chain us. They want... He paused. They want to learn from us. I frowned. Learn what? Dave leaned in, voice dropping to a whisper. They believe humans have something no other species does. Telepathy, sure, that's entry level. But deeper, telekinesis. The ability to move objects with our minds. The ability to move ourselves across space. Not machines. Not ships. Just thought. I froze, pen hovering above the page. And they think we can actually do that? They know we can, Dave said. It's dormant, buried, but it's there. That's why they're here. Not just to protect us, to wake it up, so they can study it, maybe even copy it. He leaned back, mug empty, eyes shadowed. That's the game. 3 sides. The Greys want us gone. The Anunnaki want us enslaved. The tall whites, they want us to grow, so they can see what happens when we do. Silence stretched. You still with me? Dave asked. Barely, I muttered, rubbing my temples. But yeah, he smirked, but his eyes didn't smile. Good. Then you're ready for the next part. Fong's whisper. Dave's voice dropped lower, so low I had to lean across the table to catch it. Fong told me something once. Not in a briefing. Not in front of anyone else. Just him and me. It was personal, like he was letting me peek behind the curtain. He glanced at the window as if expecting to see a pale face staring back. He said they're looking for something. A record. From Mars. Mars? Yeah. Back when it was alive. Oceans. Atmosphere. Civilizations. He said their ancestors lived there once, wrote things in stone, records meant to last forever. He wants me to find one of them. A formula. What kind of formula? Dave shook his head. Didn't say, just that it would help them teach us. Unlock our telekinesis. Said it was the key to bridging the gap between our species. I wrote it down, my hand trembling. And you believed him? Dave's eyes narrowed. I believed he believed it. But here's the part he didn't say outright. If they can get me, or someone like me, to remote view back that far, what's to stop them from asking us to do more? More? Like changing things, Dave whispered. His eyes were hard, haunted. Like wiping out a seed before it sprouts. Like making sure the Greys never become the Greys. I stared at him, the pen slipping in my hand. Don't write that part, he said quickly. Not yet. Just keep it in your head. For Lincoln. Chapter 12, Red Deserts. The next time Dave came by, he didn't look like himself. His Superman shirt was wrinkled, collar stretched. He hadn't shaved. His eyes were rimmed in the kind of fatigue that comes from fighting yourself more than the world. You all right? I asked as he slumped into the chair. Depends what you call all right, he muttered. I slid the notebook across the table. Then start from the beginning. He rubbed both hands over his face, sat back, and stared at the ceiling like he was trying to gather pieces falling out of his head. They put me in a room again. You know the type. Bare walls. One-way glass, table, chair, nothing else. They gave me coordinates. Only this time, they weren't now. What do you mean not now? I mean not this time, not this century, maybe not this planet. He leaned forward, eyes bloodshot. They told me to look back, way back. Mars. I felt my pen slip against the page. Mars? Yeah. They wanted me to see it before it died, before the atmosphere collapsed. Fong said their ancestors carved records in stone, wrote formulas that could last forever. They wanted me to find one. I swallowed. And did you? Dave barked out a laugh that had no humor in it. Dawn, I didn't even know what the hell I was doing. They told me to close my eyes, let my mind wander, trust the coordinates. And at first, nothing. Just black. But then, he shook his head slowly. It was like my brain tilted. Like someone grabbed the horizon inside me and twisted it. I felt sand in my mouth. My skin was hot, then cold. And there, he jabbed a finger against the table. There was red, not the kind you see here. Deeper, heavier, a sky that looked like it was bleeding. The pen scratched furiously across the page. I saw ruins, Dave continued, voice low. Not like pyramids, more like ribs, stone arches half buried, carved with lines that looked like math and music smashed together. For a second, I thought I saw shadows moving, people, or something like people. Then it all snapped away like a film burning in the projector. He leaned back, chest rising and falling fast. What did Fong say? I asked. Dave's lips pressed thin. He said I'd gotten close. Said with practice I could hold it longer. He kept using that word, hold, like I was gripping something slippery and they wanted me to keep my hand on it. He told me the formula was real, just buried, waiting. And you believed him? He looked at me, eyes hollow. Doesn't matter if I believe him. What matters is that I saw it, Dawn. I felt it. Mars wasn't dead in there, it was alive, and something in me touched it. The room went quiet but for the hum of the fridge. After a while, Dave said, almost in a whisper, you know what scares me? What? That maybe they're not just asking me to look. Maybe they're asking me to reach, to change something. And if I can change something. He trailed off, staring at the floor. I didn't press him. Some truths don't need to be spoken twice. Dave finally sat up, eyes steady on mine. Write it down. All of it. Lincoln needs to know that his dad wasn't crazy, that I went where no one's supposed to go. I wrote until my hand cramped. Red deserts, stone ribs, bleeding skies, shadows that might have been ancestors, and a formula waiting in the ruins of Mars. When I finished, I looked up. Dave was already on his feet, pulling his jacket tight. Next time, he said, I'll tell you what I saw when I stayed too long. Then he was gone, and I was left staring at the notebook, the words looking like someone else's handwriting, like they'd been pulled from a dream. Chapter 13? The Lost Months. It was 3, maybe 4 months before I saw Dave again. Long enough that the calendar lost its teeth and the days blurred together. Long enough that I wasn't the same man when we finally sat down again. My eyes gave out. It had been creeping up on me, the way rust creeps into steel, one flake at a time. I kept telling myself I could still work clean, that my lines were straight enough, that my shading still held. But the day came when I laid down ink and wiped, and the line wasn't clean. It wobbled, faint but there. A hesitation scarred into skin. I stood there with the machine humming in my hand, and I knew. I couldn't do it anymore. I wouldn't ruin someone's body to preserve my pride. So I closed the shop, took down the signs, pulled the flyers, packed the gear into boxes that felt heavier than they should have. Mad Hatter Tattoos was gone, and with it, a piece of me I wasn't ready to bury. I moved in with my girlfriend after that. She had steady work, steady routines. It was easier than explaining the hole inside me. But I couldn't give up the space. I still kept the shop. The blinds stayed down, the lights off, but the keys were mine. It was the last place that felt like mine. Dave didn't know. When he came looking, the shop was dark. No sign. No dawn. No answer. He told me later he thought I'd been taken, or worse. He walked the block, checked alleys, even knocked on neighbors' doors asking if anyone had seen me. Nothing. No dawn. No shop. No trail. He freaked. It was Scott who finally gave him my number. That's how Dave found me. When I answered the phone, his voice cracked through the line, half relief, half fury. Jesus, Dawn, you fall off the map? You trying to kill me? I had to shut it down, I said quietly. Eyes are shot. Couldn't keep going. The silence on the other end felt like a stone sinking into water. Then softer, you could have told me. I'm telling you now, I said. Listen, I still keep the place. It's mine, even if it's not open. If you want to meet, I'll be there. He agreed. The next night, I unlocked the shop. The door creaked like it hadn't been touched in years, even though it had only been months. Inside, the air smelled of dust and ink long dried. The autoclave sat cold in the corner, its valves rusting like old scars. My sketches curled yellow on the corkboard. The front room felt smaller, hollowed out. Dave arrived late, as always, pushing the door with his shoulder like it owed him. He stepped in and stopped dead. Christ, Dawn. he said, scanning the room. It's like a tomb. It's not dead, I shot back too quickly. Just resting. He gave me a look, half pity, half knowing. Then he crossed the room and clapped my shoulder, that heavy reassurance only he had. I thought I lost you, he said. I thought I lost me too, I admitted. We sat at the same table as always, but now the room wasn't a shop anymore. It was a bunker, a hideout, a place for secrets. Dave leaned forward, elbows on the table. Don't do that to me again. Don't disappear. Not now. Too much is moving. What's moving? I asked. He didn't answer right away. Instead, he rubbed his hands together like he was trying to warm them, though the room wasn't cold. They've been pushing me harder. Tests, assignments, Fong especially. What kind of tests? He looked at me, eyes heavy. More Mars. I straightened in my chair. Again? Again. They gave me new coordinates, told me to go deeper, hold longer. Fong said the records are real, carved in stone, a formula that can teach us how to use what's in us, telekinesis, Don, the whole thing. They think it's the key to making us worth their time. His jaw clenched. But that's not all. You know what I saw? I shook my head, pen poised. Not just ruins, not just stone. I saw movement, like shadows of people who weren't supposed to be there. Tall, thin, not whites, not Anunnaki, something else. They looked up at me, right at me, like they knew I was watching. I froze mid-scribble. What did Fong say? Dave gave a sharp laugh with no humor in it. He said, Good, you're getting closer. Like it was nothing. But Dawn, they saw me. If I'm just imagining, how the hell do shadows look back? The pen felt slippery in my hand. Dave leaned closer, his voice dropping. They're not just asking me to find formulas. They're testing if I can reach through time itself. And if I can... He trailed off, shaking his head. What do you think they'll want me to do next? I didn't answer. He tapped the notebook. Write it down. Every word. Lincoln's gonna need to know his dad didn't just see Mars, he touched it. I wrote until my hand cramped. Red deserts, stone ribs, formulas waiting, shadows that knew he was there. When I finally looked up, Dave was staring at the dark window, as if expecting a pale face to appear in the glass. Next time, he muttered, I'll tell you what happened when I stayed too long. Then he left me alone with the dust and the cold hum of the autoclave, and the weight of words I wasn't sure anyone should ever read. Chapter 14, Staying Too Long. Dave showed up looking rattled. Not tired this time. Rattled. Like someone had shaken him and set him back down, and he was still vibrating inside. He sat, cracked his knuckles, and didn't even take the coffee I offered. You ever hold your breath too long? He asked. Sure, I said slowly. Feels like your lungs are burning, right? Brain screaming at you to breathe? That's what it's like when you stay too long. I waited. They told me to go back again. Mars. Same coordinates, different time. Said I was making progress, that the shadows I saw meant I was brushing against something real. Fong told me to hold longer this time. Just hold. He said it like it was easy. Dave ran a hand over his face. So I did. I let myself sink in. At first it was like before, red deserts, stone ribs, sky like rust, but then I felt pressure, like something was squeezing the back of my skull. I tried to pull out. Nothing. My body wasn't listening. He looked at me, eyes wide and haunted. Dawn, I couldn't move, couldn't blink, couldn't breathe, and then the shadows came back. Only they weren't shadows anymore. They were people. Tall, thin, faces too sharp, eyes too dark. They were working the stone like masons. Carving. And when I realized what they were carving, he trailed off, swallowing. It wasn't words, not like we think of words. It was patterns. Geometric, endless, spirals inside spirals. My head throbbed, trying to follow it. And then one of them stopped, put down his tool, turned. Dave clenched his fists on the table. He looked right at me, right at me. Not through me, at me. And then he smiled. Dawn? I swear to God he smiled, and he started walking toward me. I could hear his feet crunching stone. Closer, closer. I tried to yank back, but I couldn't. My whole body was locked like I'd been pinned underwater. His voice dropped to a whisper. Then I felt a hand on my shoulder. Not there, not here. Somewhere in between. Heavy, cold, and in my head, clear as anything, a thought. Stay longer. He sat back, shaking his head. That's when Fong yanked me out. They said I passed out in the chair. Took 3 people to shake me awake. But Dawn, it wasn't Fong who let go of me. It was him. The one who smiled. I stared at him, heart pounding. So what do you think it means? Dave's laugh was bitter. Means they're not just records. They're alive. Or they were. Or maybe time doesn't matter to them the way it does to us. I don't know. But if I can touch them, if they can touch me back. He trailed off, eyes on the dark window again. Finally, he said, almost too quiet to hear, if I stay too long next time, I might not come back. Chapter 15, Base Pro Weekend Spring came early that year, warm and restless. The kind of weather that tricks you into thinking winter's gone for good, even though Canada always keeps one more snowstorm up its sleeve. The bugs came out in clouds, clinging to porch lights and dive bombing the lake. The Bass Pro tournament was coming to Clinton Lake, and I figured that was reason enough to call Dave. I hadn't seen him in a while. Life had shifted on both our ends, and the silence between us was getting too long. Come down for a few days, I told him on the phone. Shay and I will set up the spare room. We'll hit Clinton Lake, catch the Bass Pro, maybe get a line in ourselves. Dave didn't answer right away. When he did, his voice was edged with irritation. Ducks Unlimited cut me loose, he growled. Some farmer sued them for blowing up a dam on his property. They didn't want the fight, so they let me go. I didn't believe a word of it. That was Dave's way. Slip a cover story in like a coin under a cup. You knew there was a trick. You just didn't know where it landed. Before I could call him out, he changed the subject. My folks are selling their place, moving into one of those retirement villages. Jenna and I are thinking of buying the house. That made me grin. Then you'd be back in Ontario? Back in Oil Springs, he confirmed. Back where it started. Dave, that's the best damn news I've heard in months. And it was. But that move was still months away. For now, there was fishing to do. Friday crawled. The clock in Shay's kitchen ticked like it was moving through syrup. Every time I looked up, the hands had barely shifted. I checked the spare room twice, smoothed the sheets that didn't need smoothing, and lined up the root beers in the cooler just so. When Dave finally rolled into the driveway, the house shook with his laugh before he even got to the door. He walked in like he'd never left, ducking under the frame, eyes crinkled with that big grin. Room service better be included, he said, clapping my back. Only if you tip big, I shot back. Saturday dawned clear and golden. We hauled the bass boat down to Clinton Lake, joining a small fleet of hopefuls chasing the shadows of the Bass Pro Pros. The air smelled like cut grass and engine oil, the surface of the lake glittering like hammered copper. Dave was in his element. He baited his line with the same patience he used to stack bricks, then cast long and smooth, the lure plunking just shy of the reeds. We spent hours that way. Cast, reel, silence. Then a burst of laughter when one of us snagged on a log or lost a lure. The tournament boats roared in the distance, engines screaming, crowds on the docks cheering, but out on the water it was just us. At one point, Dave leaned back, line slack, eyes on the sky. Dawn, there's something I need to tell you. Something I couldn't say on the phone. I turned in my seat. So tell me. He shook his head. Not here. Not with 100 ears around. Tonight. At the shop. The way he said it made the air between us heavy. We fished until the sun slid low, painting the lake in molten orange. We didn't catch much, but that wasn't the point. The point was being there, side by side, the way we used to be. That night, we drove to the old tattoo shop. The place was exactly as I'd left it. Blinds half drawn, mail stacked in leaning piles on the counter, dust clinging to every flat surface. The autoclave sat cold and silent, a relic. My sketches on the corkboard had yellowed, edges curling like old leaves. Dave pulled up a chair by the window. I set 2 mugs of coffee on the table and sat across from him. You kept it, he said, scanning the empty workbench. Couldn't let it go, I admitted. Even blind, I need this place. He smiled faintly. Feels right. Like the old days. We sat late into the night, sipping coffee, swapping stories, old fishing trips, the kids when they were younger. That time he nearly tipped the bass boat trying to grab a sandwich. We laughed until our sides hurt, the dust forgotten for a while. Around midnight, the laughter thinned. The shop grew quiet, the hum of the fridge loud in the silence. Dave leaned forward, elbows on the table, eyes serious. Tomorrow night, he said. No more stalling. I'll tell you what I need to tell you. Sunday was more of the same. Fishing, joking, long drives with the windows down and the smell of spring rushing in. But beneath it all, I could feel him wound tight, carrying something heavy. That night we returned to the shop. The coffee was hotter, the silence thicker, dust hung in the air like smoke. Dave stared into his cup for a long time before speaking. Okay, Don, he said finally. No more stalling. You need to hear this, and once you do, you can't unknow it. I set my pen on the notebook. My hand was already trembling. Go on, I said, and with that, Dave began. Chapter 16. What You Can't Unknow. We went back to the shop because it was the only room that had learned how to keep a secret. The blinds breathed a little with the night air, and the dust held still like it was listening. I set 2 coffees on the table out of habit. Dave didn't touch his. He didn't circle into it this time. They asked me to try it, he said. Not just look, reach. The word hung there between us like a wire. He kept his hands flat, big knuckles pale, as if he were afraid of breaking something I couldn't see. Try what? I said. Changing a thing, he answered. Small. So small it wouldn't matter. That's what they said. He looked past me to the corkboard where my old sketches had curled like dry leaves. His eyes were tired in a way that didn't come from lack of sleep. They set me up in a room, he went on. Same bare walls, same one-way glass. Fong there, 2 others in the shadow, handlers, scientists, I don't know. They rolled in a steel table with a sheet of white paper on it. On the paper, Dave pinched the air like he was lifting something tiny. A fly, dead, wings spread out like a cheap pin. They told me to move it. I opened the notebook. The pen felt heavier than a pen should. Not with my hands, Dave said. Not with air. With whatever it is they think I have. He closed his eyes a second as if he could still feel the room on his skin. At first, it was like pushing on fog. There was resistance, but nothing to push against. And then I remembered something Fong told me when this all started. Don't push. Aim. Like you're leaning in the direction you want a thing to go and the world leans with you. He made a small motion with his chin, almost a nod. So I leaned. Inside. Toward the left wing. And dawn. It twitched. The pen ticked once against the paper. I wrote the word twitched like it was a confession. I figured it was just a draft, he said quickly. Air from a vent. A trick. I told them so. They killed the vents, sealed the door. I tried again. Not a shove, a suggestion. He tilted his head. The wing slid, 0.5 millimeter. The paper whispered. He let out a breath that had been trapped for hours. Fong smiled with just his eyes. The other 2 didn't move at all. They watched the way a gun watches. You moved it, I said. I wasn't sure if it was a question or a prayer. I moved it, he said. And then they told me to stop. He rubbed his thumb into his palm, hard, like he could grind the memory out. I didn't want to. It felt clean. Not like lifting a weight, more like catching a thread and giving it a little tug to see what it's tied to. I wanted to know what else was attached. He looked up at me and the hair on my arms rose. That's when I understood what they really wanted. The formula, I said. From Mars. That, yeah, he said. But also this. Proof the thread is there, and I can feel it. If I can nudge a wing, maybe I can nudge a coin. If I can nudge a coin, maybe I can nudge a switch. If I can nudge a switch, you can turn off a thing before it ever turns on, I finished. He nodded once. And if you can do that here, maybe you can do it then. The shop made a small noise only an old building makes, wood remembering temperature, nails reminding wood they still own it. Outside, a car hissed past in the rain. Dave didn't flinch. What else? I asked. He gave a tired smile. You think that was it? He leaned back, the chair creaking. They let me sleep, if you can call it that. Woke me after an hour. New test. Same room. This time it wasn't a fly on paper. It was a watch. Like a wristwatch? Old analog, he said, tapping the face of his own. The scar above the strap looked whiter tonight. Second-hand sweeping. They set it under a camera. Big clock up on the wall. They told me to make the small hand skip. You can't skip a small hand, I said. It creeps. Right, he said. But the second hand, that one steps. They wanted a skip. 1 beat missed. He stared at the far wall like the second hand might still be there. It was worse than the fly because it fought me. Time's sticky. You can lean till your lungs burn and the world leans back like a mule. I was about to tell them it was stupid, that it couldn't be done when I felt it again. Not resistance. Texture. He flattened his hand, moving it slowly through the air, fingers almost brushing the table. Like the surface of a pond when wind starts. Ripples. If you push, you only make more. If you breathe on it, sometimes the ripples cancel. So I didn't push, I breathed. Inside. He brought two fingers together like he was pinching a hair. And one tick didn't happen. He didn't smile. He didn't look proud. He looked scared. Fong said good the way you say good to a dog that just found a bomb, Dave said softly. The others wrote something down. Then they took the watch away like it was loaded. We sat with that a minute. Dust drifted through the beam from the exit sign and made it look like shallow water. What did Fong tell you after? I asked. That I had to stop thinking of this as a gift, he said. That gifts can be refused. He said this is a capacity. You don't opt into being tall. You don't opt into your pupils shrinking in the sun. You don't opt into leaning and the world listening. You just learn to not fall when it happens. I wrote it. Capacity, not gift. He took his first sip of coffee then, made a face at how cold it was, and set it down without looking. Why tell me now? I asked. Why not a month ago, when they first put you in that room with the fly? Because a month ago, I still thought it was mine, he said. That I could go in, do a trick, come home, forget. But then they gave me a thing I wasn't supposed to move. He reached into his jacket and pulled out a folded index card. He didn't hand it to me yet. He turned it over in his fingers like he was thinking about flipping a coin. I told you they gave me coordinates before, he said. For Mars, for stone, for the formula. Last week they gave me new numbers. Fong called them legacy markers. Not places, not times, events. I could feel the floor tilt under my chair. Events? They wanted to see if I could feel the edge of one, he said. Not change it. Just know where the thread tightens. He unfolded the card and slid it across. A neat line of digits in groups, broken by dashes. It meant nothing and everything. I sat in that room and I leaned like I've never leaned, he said. I leaned till my teeth ached. And it wasn't a place I found. It was a silence. The kind right before a word that changes a family. He swallowed. His voice went quiet. I think I found the day my father learned he was sick. Fong wouldn't say. He never does. But he put his hand on my shoulder the way you'd calm a horse and told me that was enough for one day. We let it be silent a while. The shop knew how to hold silence without making it feel empty. Okay, I said at last. You moved a wing. You skipped a tick. You found an edge. What is it you think I can't unknow? His eyes came up to mine and stayed there. No blinking. Just the look you give when you're betting everything on the other man not looking away. They want me to go back, Don, he said. Farther than Mars. Farther than anything. Back to when something that isn't the Greys yet is about to be. They won't say it. They won't write it. But it's there in the way they're teaching me. They want me to learn how to lean on a thread so early it never spools. The room moved. Not physically. The way a stomach drops in an elevator. I kept my hands on the table so I wouldn't reach for something that wasn't there. You think they want you to... I couldn't finish. He did it for me. Erase, he said. Before the word Greys ever gets said. No, I said. It came out small and ugly. I know, he said. Believe me, I know. He pushed the index card closer with two fingers. And here's the part I hate telling you. If I can't or won't do what they're leading me to, they'll find someone else who can. That's why I had to find you when you vanished. I needed to know you were still here. Because if I have to run... You run to me, I said. You run here. He nodded. And if I can't run, you keep the ledger. And you make sure Lincoln knows what his father refused to be. We let that sit. Neither of us pretended to be brave. He rubbed his palms on his jeans and tried to shake off the weight. It didn't shake. There's one more thing, he said. I haven't told you because it sounds crazy. I raised my eyebrows. Oh, now it sounds crazy. He almost laughed. Pony, he said. The name landed like a coin on glass. She's been in the edges, not like before at the base. Not speech, not words, more like a pressure that means look up. Twice in the last month I felt it. Right before a truck ran a light and right before a ladder slipped at work. Head tilt and then danger. Saved me once, cost me a night's sleep every time. You think she's helping you, I said, not sure if it was a question. I think she's watching, he said. Sometimes watching looks like help. Sometimes it looks like a cat with a mouse it hasn't decided to kill. We sat with that too. I wrote as much as my hand would allow, then closed the notebook because there are moments when the pen makes things too real. What do you need from me right now? I asked. He didn't hesitate. Light, he said. Keep the back hall light on when you're here. Leave the front dark. If I text West Gate, you know what to do. If I say where we met, you go to a public place with cameras and you don't sit near the door. And if you say, tap twice? I asked, remembering. He tapped the table twice, soft as breath. Then we talk about fishing until whoever's listening gets bored. We did. For another hour, we told lies about the size of fish we'd caught and the ones that got away. We drank coffee that had gone cold twice over, warmed it in the microwave until it tasted like machine, and drank it anyway. The dust picked a place to settle and settled there. When he stood to go, he hesitated at the door and looked back with something like apology. If I text you numbers, he said, don't answer. Just write them. Paper. Ballpoint. You'll know if they're for Mars or for something worse by how your stomach feels. Dave, I said. My throat felt too narrow. I don't want you to be part of this. I don't want us to be part of this. He smiled the way he used to when he'd lift a kid into the air until she shrieked. We don't get to want, he said. We get to choose. He slipped out into the alley, big shoulders filling the frame for a second, then gone. The door eased shut. The shop exhaled. I sat a long time. Wrote 3 words on a clean page so I'd see them when I opened the notebook next time. Wing, tick, edge. Outside, spring rain started. Inside, the coffee cooled to a skin. The clock on the wall swept second by second without a single skip. I stared anyway, waiting for the one that didn't happen. Chapter 17, Fallout. The call came late. Alberta late. His voice was cracked open, not the usual booming Dave. They're done with me, Don. I sat up straighter, the receiver hot against my ear. Done how? Discontinued. Their word, not mine. He took a breath that rattled down the line. It almost got me killed, he said. Fong. The handlers. A fight I wasn't supposed to have. I stayed quiet, let him tell it. They sat me in the room, same setup as always. Bare table, one-way mirror, coordinates sealed in an envelope. This time I asked what I was supposed to see before I leaned. His voice sharpened. I wanted to know. Not after. Not later. Before. And they didn't like that. No, one of the handlers barked at me, said I didn't get to ask questions. That I was there to obey, not to think. I told him I wasn't a dog. I could picture it. Dave, massive across the chair, arms folded, glaring at men who thought clipboards made them bigger. One of them grabbed my arm, Dave continued. That's when Fong moved. You never see him move fast, but he stepped in between us, just stood there, tall as a doorframe. Handler backed off, but the room was fire, voices raised. I thought they'd shut the door and leave me in there. His voice dropped. For a minute, I thought I wasn't coming out. My stomach turned cold. They argued, Fong staring one way, Handler shouting the other, then silence. Then, you're done here. Just like that. Escort back to my quarters. Next morning, they dumped me outside the gate. No goodbye, no answers, just gone. And that's when Ducks Unlimited cut you loose, I said slowly. A bitter laugh. Yeah. Lawsuit over a dam, clean story, neat and tidy. The kind of thing you can tell your in-laws. The kind of thing that makes the real truth disappear. Months later, he was on the road east. Jenna was knee-deep in packing boxes and realtor calls in Alberta, but Dave was already half gone. He'd been to Quebec to see his brother, and he was making runs back and forth to Oil Springs, finalizing the house his parents left behind. That's when we finally sat together again. At the shop, late, dust in the air, mail stacked untouched. He looked lighter, almost free, but his eyes still carried something. They think I'm finished, he said, but I'm not. Because of Fong? He nodded. And Pony, she's still there. Sometimes it's words, sometimes just pressure, like a thumb in the back of my mind. Twice she's warned me in time to duck. Once she saved me from a crash, Dawn. I'm telling you, she advocates for me, keeps me alive. Fong, too, in his way. And the handlers? I asked. They'll move on to the next guy. They always do. But I'm not clean. Not really. Fong and Pony won't let me be. He pulled a folded piece of paper from his jacket. Not coordinates this time. Notes for job interviews. Clean Energy Canada, he said. Wind farms. Ontario's full of them. Real work. Real paycheck. Nothing classified. I smiled. That's the best thing I've heard from you in a long time. Yeah, he said, and then quieter. But keep the ledger closed on, just in case. Chapter 18, The Last Day. The timing of it all feels cruel in hindsight. While Dave was boxing up his life in Alberta, bouncing between Quebec and Oil Springs to finalize the house his parents left behind. I was moving too. Me and Shay had called it quits. It was friendly, amicable, the way people say it's supposed to be. But friendly doesn't stop a house from feeling hollow when you walk through it alone. There's a difference between moving into a place and moving back into one. My old house had dents in the drywall with stories attached, chips in the paint I remembered putting there. It was mine again, but it was emptier. Shay's laugh wasn't in the kitchen anymore, and at night, the silence pressed in harder than I expected. Dave's voice mirrored that emptiness when he called. "She's still at it," he said. "Who?" I asked, though I already knew. "Pony." The word dropped like a stone. He didn't have to explain, but he did anyway. Now that the handlers aren't watching me, she slips in whenever she wants. Dreams. Daytime. Naked most of the time. Always pushing. Always trying. I rubbed at my temple. Jesus, Dave. I didn't want to get her in trouble, but the next time I felt Fong, I told him. That caught my attention. And Fong apologized, said we have laws for that, she'll have to be re-educated. The way he repeated the words chilled me. Dave wasn't rattled often, but there was fear in his voice. Fear and sympathy. She's not human, Dawn, but she's not a monster either. She's like a kid who doesn't know the rules. Still, I'm a married man. I couldn't just let it keep happening. And now she hates you for it, I said. He sighed. Yeah, won't even look at me when she pushes in. Can't blame her. A week later, another call. This one wasn't embarrassment. It was steel. Fong admitted it, Dave said flatly. Admitted what? What I suspected. Going back. Wiping the Greys before they even become the Greys. He said it's their right, their destiny. With or without me, it's what they're going to do. The silence on the line was thick. That was the last time I ever heard him, Dave said finally. But Pony lingered. She hadn't forgiven him, but she wasn't finished either. She overheard my old handlers talking, Dave told me when he was back east visiting family. Loose ends. That's what they called it. Loose ends. Guess who's a loose end? His laugh was short and bitter. She told me to be careful. One last time. Then she vanished. The last time I saw him was quieter than all of that. No fishing rods, no autoclave humming in the corner, no tattoo gear on the shelves. Half the shop was gone, stripped bare, machines sold, supplies boxed and carried away. I had let it all go. Now it was just me, my house, and an old console hooked up to a TV. Dave dropped by in jeans and a faded Superman shirt, hair damp from the road. He dropped onto the couch with a sigh, controller in hand, before we even loaded the game. Man, I missed this, he said. What? Losing to me? He grinned. Dream on. You're about to get schooled. We played for hours. Trash talk, laughter, root beers sweating on the table. Every once in a while, I'd glance at him and see the man who had lugged an autoclave up my porch steps, who had turned my kids' laughter into music in the backyard, who had sat across from me in midnight confessions about aliens and time itself. All of that condensed into the click of buttons and the hum of a game console. Between rounds, the memories spilled out. Remember the autoclave? I said, laughing as my character fell off the screen. That stink hung in the drywall for weeks. Dave chuckled, eyes fixed on his controller. Best war relic I ever dragged into a townhouse. Made us legit, though. Health inspector never saw it coming. Later, during a rematch, he muttered, Man, your kids love Dave's cave. Still can't believe I lived with a toilet in the middle of the room. They still talk about it, I said. Uncle Dave in the dungeon. You were Batman to them. He shook his head. Batman didn't sleep on a furnace pipe and a mattress squeezed between concrete walls. We laughed, but the sound had a catch to it, like we both knew the joke was holding back something heavier. At one point, he put the controller down and stared at the paused screen. Remember Creighton Lake? Of course, I said. You know, if we hadn't gone that day, if you hadn't said screw it, I don't know where I'd be now. I tried to joke. Probably building crooked walls somewhere. He laughed, but it faded fast. Or nowhere. We kept playing until the laughter thinned and the pauses grew longer. Root beer cans piled on the table. He beat me twice. I beat him 3 times, and we argued about who was keeping score. When he finally stood, he stretched, groaning like an old man. I'm in Ottawa for 2 more days, he said at the door. Tomorrow night? Yeah, I said. Tomorrow night. I watched him walk out into the dark, shoulders hunched against the cool air. Late that night, Dave slipped into a coma. Looking back now, there are so many things I wish I'd told him. But at the time, I didn't know. At the time, his fate was still uncertain. Chapter 19. The Call. The phone rang the next morning, and it was James. His voice carried that tight edge people use when they're trying to keep control but barely can. "What's going on?" he asked. "What do you mean?" "About Dave. I heard he had a stroke. They said he's in the hospital, in a coma." I sat there stunned, phone hot against my ear. "What? No. I didn't hear anything. This is the first I'm hearing of it." We both went silent for a moment, the kind of silence that says more than words. Finally, James sighed. "Jenna called me," he said. "She told me Dave's an Ottawa General, coma, maybe a stroke or something. She and Lincoln are already on their way up. The rest of the family, too." The words landed like bricks. Yesterday, Dave was sitting in my living room, laughing at video games, asking if I was free tomorrow night, and now this. I told James I didn't know anything more than he did, that it was the first I was hearing of it. But the truth was, a knot had already formed in my gut. I hurried through the halls of the Ottawa General, chest tight, only to hit a wall I never expected. "Family only," the nurse said, flat, practiced. "I'm his best friend," I argued. "I've known him for years." She shook her head before I even finished. "Family only." They had the whole waiting area sealed off, and to my shock, there were cops posted up at the doors. Blue uniforms standing stiff, eyes scanning everyone. It wasn't just a hospital anymore. It was a crime scene. Word leaked quick. Drugs, bottles, hotel room wrecked. They said he'd been found on the floor beside the bed like some party had gone wrong. I stood frozen in the corridor. That wasn't Dave. Not the man who'd had a gastric bypass and couldn't even handle a beer. Not the man who'd sworn off that life years ago. I spotted Jeremy across the room and raised a hand. He turned his head, ignored me. Jenna walked by, eyes forward, face like stone. She didn't look my way either. It was James who finally broke ranks. "I'm sorry, Dawn," he said quietly, pulling me aside. "They only want family in there." "Who?" I asked. "Who's saying that?" He rubbed the back of his neck. "First they said it was the cops. Then they said Jenna. Then Jeremy. I don't know who's pulling the strings." I nodded, jaw tight. "Whoever it is, it's wrong." I tried again with the cops. "Listen, you've made a mistake. Dave doesn't do drugs. He hasn't touched that stuff in years. And booze, he can't even drink anymore. One beer tips him over. You're not going to find him surrounded by bottles. You're wrong." The officer didn't even flinch. "Don't talk to me. Talk to the detectives." "Fine," I said. "Where are they?" "They're not talking," he shot back. "Move along." And that was it. I walked back out into the Ottawa air with nothing but questions. Went home with worry gnawing at me. My kids asked what was wrong, and I had to tell them. Tracy and the girls, and especially Scott, it hit them hard. Everyone wanted to see Dave. Everyone wanted to believe it was a mistake, and everyone was told no. 3 days of that. 3 days of silence, of locked doors, of feeling betrayed. 3 days of wondering what was happening behind those hospital walls. Then, 3 days later, a pounding on my door. It was James. Eyes red, face streaked with tears. He shoved his phone at me. On the screen was a picture. Dave's shoulder. The lion I had inked on him years ago. Bold. Fierce. Unforgettable. "I want this," James said, voice cracking. "I want this tattoo. I want to remember my brother." "James, I haven't tattooed in years," I said, shaking my head. "My eyes aren't the greatest anymore. I don't want to mess this up." "I know you can do it, Dawn," he said, choking up. "I know you can. Please." I couldn't tell him no. "Okay," I said softly. "Okay. I'll try. I'll do my best." We ordered a kit off Amazon, rush delivery. 24 hours. James paid without hesitation. While we waited, I sat hunched over my table, paper scattered around me. I drew the lion. Then I drew it again, and again, redrawing until my hand cramped, trying to burn the lines into muscle memory, so even if my eyes failed me, my hand would still know the path. This wasn't just ink. This was James's grief, Dave's memory, and my chance to do right by both. The next evening, just after 6, the kit arrived. We tore it open, and to my relief, it had everything: sterile needles, alcohol swabs, even a few bottles of ink in the right shades. It felt like luck, or maybe something more. We set up in my stripped down space. The shop was gone, but a couple of chairs remained, and that was enough. James sat down, shirt off, shoulder bare, and I prepped the machine with hands that trembled more than I wanted to admit. The buzz filled the room, sharp and steady, and I began. For 4 hours we sat together, James talking, sometimes rambling, sometimes whispering. His voice cracked often, and mine did too. More than once I had to blink hard, fighting back tears, because the last thing I wanted was to blur my vision, or worse, let a tear drop into the open skin. I told myself, stay stoic, but it wasn't working. The lion took shape line by line, shading by shading, as James told stories. Growing up with Dave, playing ball in the yard, the time they'd gone to Mexico on a trucking run, just like me and Dave had gone to Newfoundland. His voice broke often, and we sat in silence just as often, letting the machine's buzz fill the space where words failed. Finally, I wiped away the last bit of ink, spread a layer of Vaseline across the fresh lines. The lion stared back at us, proud, fierce, alive. That's when James's phone rang. He put it on speaker without thinking, and Jeremy's voice came through, flat and heavy. They just pulled the plug on Dave. He's gone. We both froze, the hum of the machine still echoing in the room. I set the rag down slowly. Well, I said, voice breaking, at least we got the tattoo done just in time. Sorry, Dave was waiting for us to finish before he passed. James bowed his head, tears falling onto his chest, and for a long while we just sat there in the silence, the lion watching over us. Chapter 20, The Vanishing. They took Dave's body back to Oil Springs for burial. Part of me understood. It was his home, his roots, the place where he'd grown up. But another part of me couldn't shake the feeling that it was also one more way to cut me and my family out of the grieving process. No service in Ottawa. No gathering where his friends here could say goodbye. Just gone. After that, the grief twisted into anger. I was upset. I was angry. I was distraught. None of it made sense. Not the drugs, not the secrecy, not the way his family closed ranks and shut me out. And so I decided to start looking into things myself. The first stop was the hotel where Dave had been staying that week. I parked outside, staring at the brick and glass, wondering what answers could possibly hide behind automatic doors and lobby smiles. As I stood there, a woman in uniform came out carrying a cart stacked with fresh linens. "Excuse me," I said, stepping toward her. Do you know anything about the man who died here last week? David Strydonk?" She blinked at me, surprised, then nodded. "Yes, I'm the one who found him." Her voice lowered. It was strange. He'd been here all week, and not a towel out of place, not a glass tipped over. Then suddenly, the room was trashed. A mess, like someone tore it apart. My chest tightened. "You're sure?" She nodded again, but her eyes darted toward the entrance. "Yeah. Weirdest thing I've ever seen." I thanked her for telling me, wishing even as I walked away that I had thought to get her name, her number, anything to anchor her words. Inside, I went to the front desk, trying to look casual. "I'm here to settle the account for David Strydonk," I said. "He's the one who had a coma and passed away in your hotel room last week." The clerk tapped a keyboard, then shook his head. "No record of that name, sir." I frowned. "No, you don't understand. He was here a week. I just spoke to one of your maids outside. She told me she found him." The clerk met my eyes, flat and deliberate. "No, you didn't." For a moment, the room seemed to tilt. His expression wasn't confusion. It was warning. "We never had a David Strydonk in this hotel," he repeated. I felt a chill crawl up my spine. I'm a big man, not easily scared. But in that moment, I knew something wasn't right, and I didn't know who else might be listening. I just nodded, turned, and walked out. After that, I tried other ways. Friends, family, conversations with Jenna, with Jeremy. None of them gave me anything. If anything, they clammed up harder, like I'd crossed some invisible line. Jenna said once that when she finally went down to Dave's old man cave in the Alberta basement, she found it full of bottles. She'd never gone down there before, not once in all the years they'd lived there. I didn't believe it, not for a second. It didn't fit the man I knew, the man who couldn't drink a beer without tipping over after his surgery. They moved back to Oil Springs after that, back into Dave's childhood house, but without Dave. And as far as I know, they still live there. I went home, sat down with a notepad, and started writing. Not for me, not even for James or Jeremy or Jenna. For Lincoln. For the boy who had lost his father before he could really know him. And when Lincoln turns 20, I will find him. I have something for him, and a lifetime of memories to share. Dedication, For Dave, my brother in all but blood. From Clayton Lake to Dave's Cave, from the open road to long nights of laughter, you were larger than life in every way that mattered. You wore your Superman shirts like armor, but it was your heart that made you a hero. For Lincoln, so you'll know the man your father truly was. Not the rumors, not the silence, but the real Dave. Strong, stubborn, kind, funny, and fiercely loyal. When the world tried to erase his story, I carried it here for you, and for everyone who's ever had a friend like a brother and knows the weight of carrying their memories when they're gone.